Greetings. This is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Today's episode will feature an interview from another podcast I am working on called the Business of Creativity Podcast. The podcast highlights creativity in business, leadership, management, and entrepreneurship. Take a listen. Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the Business of Creativity Podcast, where we highlight creativity in business, leadership, management, and entrepreneurship. Our guest today is Urina Harrell. Urina is the CEO at Vox Pop Branding. Greetings, Urina. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ty. Thanks for having me.
Now, this company is roughly 11 years old, right? That's a long time for a small business to start and continue, which I think is very impressive. And you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understand is you offer marketing services and consulting for small businesses and nonprofits, right?
That is correct. We've just added SaaS to the equation this year, but yeah, marketing services and consulting to nonprofits and small businesses.
Okay, added SaaS, software as a service. Remind me what SaaS stands for.
It stands for software as a service.
Okay.
It's a huge big thing, and I'm really happy to be entering that space now.
Okay, well, I'm definitely going to ask you about that. Background, you ran track at Duke, right? Student athlete, which is excellent. Did your graduate work in the United Kingdom. The name of the school is Loughborough University in the United Kingdom. And one of the jobs you had in the past was working as a buyer for Walmart. Now, the reason I have you on is because I want to ask you a couple things. Mm-hmm. You once told me that most problems in business, or maybe small business, are really around some form of communication.
100%.
And so I really want to ask you about that. But before I ask you about that, the purpose of Vox Pop Branding. What is the purpose of the organization? You've been around 11 years. I'm sure you have a purpose in terms of why you exist as an organization.
Yeah. So Vox Pop actually is short for Vox Populi, which is Latin for voice of the people. So the purpose of Vox Pop Branding is we want to make it more profitable and popular to help people grow their businesses using marketing, but using it with the undertone of positive impact messaging. I think it's really important to do great work, but it's not good enough to me to just, you go and make a ton of money or you make people successful and you did it in horrible ways, right? You manipulated people on the way up. To me, it's just as important how you do something as the way you did it or the fact that you did it. So Vox Pop is all about, let's make these businesses profitable. Let's make these nonprofits more impactful, but let's make sure that the messaging is really focused on on affecting people in a positive way.
Okay. So that's a big part of it. So if somebody comes to you and needs your help and they really aren't focused on the positive aspect of doing things with impact or doing things in a positive way, you won't take them on as a client?
No, I won't. I've had clients come on and they really didn't understand the vision. They're like, I'm just trying to sell jeans. Why do I have to do this whole positive impact messaging thing? And after a few conversations, we either convert them to seeing that vision or be giving them a chance to try it with us. And if they don't like it, they can find somebody else, or they just decide upfront, no. A lot of times I've gotten lucky with converting people to a new way of doing things and them seeing the success and seeing what it looks like to build community in a way that is really conscious of how the end user feels. What they find is they find more loyalty, they find more sales, they find a lot of great things on the other side of that they didn't expect when we first started out with those type of positive impact messaging campaigns.
I find that interesting. So there's an aspect of that to where adding that caveat became important to you. Where did that tie in when you created the business?
That was actually the very beginning. So the entire reason I started Vox Pop, I was actually a sophomore in college when I started it. A lot of people don't know that. I was kind of amongst a lot of people. I was at a university that was pretty large and a lot of, A-type personalities, a lot of overachievers in one pond, trying to swim and figure out what they're doing. All my friends were pre-med or engineers or pre-law. Like they knew exactly what they wanted to do. And I was here, psych major. I loved entrepreneurship, but I was also creative. Like I paint on the side, and I felt like I was wasting this opportunity because I was around all these people who knew what they wanted. Um, Long story short, I end up doing a project that has you go out and interview different business owners and careers you think you want to do. And that really helped me quickly realize like half the stuff I was thinking about becoming, going into psychology, going into all these different things was not for me, even though that was my major. Um, I realized that, you know what, marketing may have been the interception of all those things. And I tried it out. And what I realized in that process too was like a lot of what I understood marketing to be. I started reading books and best practices, and everybody talked about separating people from their money as fast as possible. But nobody talked about like giving back or how those messages were affecting people. This is also the same time that social media was getting really, really concrete. And businesses were starting to realize the utility of social around this time too. So we have now social media is being monetized. We have me reading these books about how marketing impacts folks and how your goal is just to like, no matter how they're feeling, take their money basically. And I was like, this is not what I want to stand for. I like this
Right.
career. I like this industry, but this is not my vibe. So long story short, I decided I was doing a class by Toni Morrison, or not by Toni Morrison. We were reading books all by Toni Morrison, and she had a quote at the time that said that she began writing in her 40s because she had yet to read the book that she wanted to read. And I was like, you know what? If I can't find a marketing agency that does what I want to do, how I want to do it, then I'll just create one. So that's what happened. And then this is before NIL deals. You mentioned I was a student athlete. So I had to create a business under a different name because I legally could not keep my scholarship and have it under my name. So that's why it was at the inception. It was the core of me not liking what the status of the industry was.
In business, many successful businesses are solving a problem as opposed to just selling a good idea, right? And I guess the problem you identified was that helping people to communicate better without the positive message could be problematic. Tell me what the problem was you saw.
Yeah.
Was it just a lack of this type of business, or what problem did you see out there in the world that you felt like you were solving for, other than your want to to use positivity in messaging?
Yeah, I will say that I was so early in the process of understanding even how a business worked that I didn't get that far. I just started based on what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in this space. I know that businesses have products and services, and I know that they need to be amplified. So my problem was a tried and true problem. Everybody knows this problem exists.
Right.
It wasn't until recently that I reversed into, after 11 years of business, that I reversed into a more robust problem, which is where that SaaS thing comes in. But realistically, what I saw was a problem for myself.
Right.
That I wanted to, get in on it and figure out how I can navigate it while I had the safety of a dorm room and meal plan before I had to enter the real world.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even if we go a little deeper with that, even if in the beginning you didn't see it as you're solving a problem, you saw it as a good idea and you started executing on it. At some point in the first 2 or 3 years, it seemed like the problem would actually start presenting itself. Like these companies don't realize that positivity or being positive probably could help them even better than just a marketing type consultancy.
Yeah.
I wonder, was there an inflection point, or was there a client where it kind of solidified that, okay, this was a problem that a lot of people don't deal with in addition to my good idea, and this is actually working?
Yeah, I think it didn't solidify early. I will say that the problem really stayed on, and people and I'm gonna be honest, people aren't even sold yet on positive impact messaging as a key issue for building community and then it being profitable. Like I'm probably really early on in the stage of trying to educate people that this is even possible, right?
Which makes it excellent. Yeah.
That's a key thing. They still want to focus on results and ROI, and they don't care how they get it yet, really. So I still have that one struggle. The problem, I think, that I realized was that it was mostly underserved businesses who needed it the most, who were closing the fastest. So I just doubled down on that. And then tried to partner with accelerators and foundations and funds who service those folks en masse, so that I can test out my ideas without it being as costly to like individuals. So instead of having one or two clients that I was, implementing some campaign strategies for, I would partner with the foundation or accelerator, and I would be included as part of their problem, or part of their grant, or part of their program. And it was no cost to some of those businesses, but I got to see hundreds or 300s or 400 worth of beta testers in what I'm trying to do. So I think the problem is still, I see the problem clearly, is that people haven't accepted that it's a problem yet in mass. And it's also a lot of, we are in cancel culture, we're in high political tensions, all these things are coming to play. So people aren't even really ready to accept that this is what needs to happen yet, because they feel like it comes with all these undertones. Because when I say positive impact messaging, they go down a rabbit hole of, oh, you believe all these things? I'm like, no, I just don't want you to go to sleep subconsciously and talk about how many ways you hate yourself after seeing an advertisement for one of my clients. Like that's what I don't want to do. So
what's interesting is that people may not know it's a problem, but when they engage you and you identify, hey, this is the way we do things with this consultancy, and then they accept that it's a problem, they see positive results, right? So that's kind of excellence, right? So people engage you. You tell them, hey, there are these things, but then there's also this thing, which we specialize in, and it can lead to positive results. They accept it, and it works. I think that's actually pretty brilliant. It is hard to change the entire world or entire thought process of capitalism, of separating people from their money, the entire industry of marketing. It's hard to change that. But when people engage and you explain and they accept it as a problem, it's successful. That's excellent, in my opinion.
That's my life's mission. We have a long journey ahead.
Right. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that what you mentioned to me, and I don't know if this is your philosophy or come from somewhere else, but it came from you, so I'm gonna credit you, is that most organizations' problems stem from some type of communication issue. Talk to me about that. Expound on that for a little bit.
Yeah. So one, communication makes the world go round. And that's not even just an organization. That's a government. That's a nation. That's down to family, down to relationships. Communication literally is what you target if you want something to change. So for example, it's been used for good and bad in the past. Communication is why we've had some of the worst wars we've ever seen. The same way communication is the same way we've had some of the greatest changes we've ever seen, or movements, right? People start recognizing social justice issues because of what? People start talking about it in mass, or there was a message that was unified and so loud that it had to be heard, and people hooked onto it. What I say, communication is the core of most businesses' problems, because normally it's either one of these things. If you have a business and it has employees, you don't talk to your employees enough to know what the real issues operationally are.
Okay.
And if you do talk to them, you either talk at them or you don't listen to them to know what those issues are. Conversely, maybe employees don't talk to leadership enough to know what their real goals are. They just are doing the task and ticking off the boxes they've been given, but they don't see how it fits into the big picture of something, which is where a disconnect will happen. Even if communication around a mission is like, let's say everybody loves the organization, but the boss says, I need you to create me a website, do this social, HR need you to do these 5 things, and that's it. The CEO knows why he's asking for these things, but the people who are doing them don't, and they're just doing it in their silos and not understanding, okay, but what's your actual goal? Like, what are we trying to get to? Because the CEO hired other people for a reason, because he's knowledgeable, but he's probably a really good bird's eye view person, and he doesn't always know the best way to get through the neighborhoods or navigate the streets, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On the other side, if a business is struggling with like sales or revenue, that's a communication problem, because they don't understand what their customers want, needs, or their experience. There's something that's not right. Something's not being communicated properly. Or if they have a high churn rate or a lot of customer dissatisfaction, either they're not properly communicating what they offer to their customers and their clients and setting the right expectations, or they, again, don't understand what their customers or clients want. Yeah. All of it goes back to, is there understanding? And that understanding takes communication.
Let me see if I can rehash, because I think it's pretty excellent, right? Leadership of the organization is not communicating well with the people who, well, let's talk in 50,000 feet and the people who are doing the work, right? People who are at 50,000 feet building strategy are not communicating with the people who are doing the work about what exactly is happening and how things can improve within the organization, or what's happening on the ground or in the weeds. And then next is the people who are doing the work are not communicating with leadership, meaning leadership is spelled out. Leadership may have spelled out what they want to happen, spelled out the values and the purpose of the organization, try their best to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. But the people doing the work are essentially just doing the job and not talking about how the job is affecting the customers they interact with, affecting them themselves as employees, etc. down the line. Next is the customer. Either the company or leadership in the organization or whatever, the company is not communicating well with the customer in terms of knowing what the needs and wants of the customers are, or I forgot the last thing. Remind me again.
Yeah. So either they're not communicating or hearing from their customers enough to know what the needs and wants are and not meeting those needs, or they aren't communicating to the customers exactly what they offer in a way that sets the right expectation. Like, you can't be Taco Bell offering and they think they're going to get a burger. Right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think those are four things that are excellent. So based on your philosophy, everything is rooted in all those things. I mean, most problems you have found over the last 11 years are rooted in those things. And so my assumption is that as a consultant, the solutions you provide are also rooted in some form of those things, correct?
Yeah.
When did you realize that? Like, when did you realize that this communication is the root of a lot of things within business?
I'm a systems person, so I pay attention to patterns. I have data on every task and how long it's taking me to do it since the first day I started. So I could see, and I would pay attention to where things would break down. And it was always, someone didn't know the big goal, or I just noticed, I was like, it was always a communication issue. It was never that people just didn't want to, nobody just doesn't want the end result, because the end result, whether you're an employee or CEO or customer, you're incentivized to make it work. So people usually tell you or ask you what they need. It's understanding it or not, or understanding where that fall through goes. And I was just thinking about, like, okay, who has the best systems? The best systems, realistically, for me, like as far as a service goes, are like fast food restaurants. And the reason why I say that is because so much information has to be relayed from one person to the next, and then it has to be processed in a very quick, we're talking about like 5 minutes, that multiple parties have to communicate. And I was like, wow, whenever something's not right, it's always a communication issue. And there's so many systems in place to keep communication from getting lost. Can I repeat your order to you? Can I do XYZ? Did you know that comes with this? This is an upcharge. And I realized that process, it works really well. It works more than it doesn't. So if you can take something like that, look at the system, look at where communication is breaking down, then it'll apply elsewhere. That's kind of just how I got to it. I was like, whenever I have an issue, it's usually a communication problem.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And that's assuming that all parties involved are operating under the best for the parties involved, meaning they're not stealing, they're not crooked, there's no immoral things going on.
Yeah, right? And if you go down even those roads, sometimes it is still a communication issue. They didn't communicate they didn't communicate what they actually wanted. And because of that, there's resentment or whatever in place. And now somebody feels like they have to take, like, literally, it always comes back to me to the same thing, right? Is you didn't communicate what you wanted. Now your feelings hurt. Now you feel spiteful. Now you feel like you have to take instead of ask. Like
okay. If I wanted to steal, I guess I'm still not communicating with you, but I'm doing it on my own. Like if I come in with bad intentions, communication.
But it's even like, how did you get to the point where you felt like you had to steal? Like, how did you get to that place?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it might be a childhood trauma.
Right. But it's funny because when you realize, like, I don't think that people are all inherently bad. I think people are injured and don't know how to navigate.
Exactly. I agree with that. People are definitely injured, right? Even this is way tangent, but even every time you see a villain in a cartoon or anything, like this villain or this monster is probably just projecting trauma on you. That's why they're chasing after you, because they're even like Jason, right? Freddy, everything was just projecting trauma on the people around them from whatever happened when they were younger in their background. It's crazy.
The Joker and Harley Quinn are the perfect example of that. Like he turned a whole new villain by projecting his trauma into her doing the psych sessions. Like
exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Communication, 100%. Literally through talking.
Communication. You're right. Exactly. I agree. Which is excellent. Walmart. Being a buyer.
Yeah.
Which allowed you, and this is me looking at some of your Instagram stories and following you on social media, allowed you to see how things were presented, right, in a commercial aspect, but then also how companies looked at how they decided what to present to these customers, right? Another communication. All this is still communication. So tell me about Walmart and the impact that had on your process and thoughts on how you do things.
Yeah. Walmart, I actually applied to initially when I first, got back from my master's, and I was still building my agency, right? I was a student, so now I needed to be full-time to take care of myself. So I was applying for stuff. They didn't pick me at first. They came back 2 years later after my agency was up and swinging. And I basically had a really hard, long talk with my mom. And I was like, I have this opportunity. I have clients. I have employees. Like, do I take this? And she was like, it's a learning op. Go to the interview. If you get it, yay. If you don't, you met some good contacts. End up landing the interview. I was so relaxed because I didn't really think I was going to get it, to be honest. I was just like, I have a business. I don't really need to be here.
Right.
Super chill. Next thing you know, I'm getting an offer and I decide to go ahead and take it. I'm running my agency at the same time. I hired somebody to project manage while I'm kind of full-time at Walmart. But before and after, I was right back on my computer. So it was like 80-hour work weeks. What I got to see, though, as a buyer, and if you don't know what buyers do, I'm going to break it down really quickly because I think that's an important level set. What buyers do is every single product you see at a Walmart or Target, any of these stores, there is a person who's in charge of that category to curate what you get to buy in store and online. Some organizations have it separated where there's a different store buyer for what's on the shelf versus what's online, because it is a different back end. Like the store, you're limited on space. So now you have to make sure you hit your sales goals, hit your sales numbers with a limited amount of space, because it's physical space you're dealing with. Online, you're dealing with website space. So you have a lot more opportunity. You have a lot more flexibility. And depending on if you decide to pull it in owned, meaning the company buys it outright versus the vendor ships it from their warehouse, you have even more flexibility. So it's two different tactics when you're tackling buying. But that's what buyers do. And they're category experts. When I tell you category experts, I mean, my category was bike apparel for a while, and then I transitioned to other stuff. But that meant I was in charge of anything that you wore: helmets, knee pads, the elbow pads, all that stuff, right?
Yep.
What I learned in that process was, one, how to optimize things like a website page from a brand perspective. I learned how to negotiate with vendors, how to do things like co-ops. Co-ops are really interesting because, for example, if you're a brand and you want to have a sale for Black Friday, technically Walmart, depending on the relationship, owns that product. So you can't just say, hey, Walmart, drop it down to 40%.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And not tell them, because then they're going to be looking at you like, well, our products didn't sell. You affected us. We have an agreement in place. So you say, actually, I'm going to instead of you paying, because you don't pay up front most of the time. I mean, they don't pay up front. They pay like 90 days after they have the product in hand. So saying, hey, Walmart, when you send your purchase order, I'll give you a $5 credit on every helmet with this brand so that it could sell faster and you can drop the price in stores. These are type of things that we would not have known, or I would not have known, if I hadn't sat at the table and been the decision maker. And what I would say for me was that was a huge eye opener. Also, because when you're a buyer, your manager has hard sales numbers for you, and their sales numbers boils up into a department or an aisle in a store, and that goes up to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. And basically, they are on you. They don't care about what buyer did this, what brand did this, or what vendor did that. They want to know every single day, are you on track for hitting that $3 million sales number for the day? So all your buying decisions, yeah, you have decisions you can make. You can say, put this product in stores or not, but your decisions literally have direct financial impact. And if you pick somebody new, you pick a new brand in store new, and they don't perform, the manager doesn't care. They're looking at you like you made that choice. That product's not moving. What are you going to do about it? And that's what I learned. And that's some of the stuff I try to kind of communicate to our up and coming brands, because it's a lot more than what people think.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting, actually. And tell me how, if you can give this example, give me an example of that knowledge to a client in the last 5 or 6 years without giving away secret sauce, and how you applied that.
Last week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Last Tuesday, a woman has started a new line of popsicles. They're vegan popsicles. She is a small kid, and he always wanted popsicles for breakfast. She's a chef, and she wanted to make them healthier. I'm not going to drop the brand name.
Right. Okay.
But I will say that I spoke with her, and she's trying to get into small local markets first, because she feels like that's easier. And I tried to communicate to her a few things. I said, one, small local markets can be easier, but they also can be a challenge, because they don't have, like, you're going to spend the same amount of time having these buyer meetings, and now you only have 1 or 2 local markets that will hold your product, and you're going to be on the hook for driving as much traffic to their stores as possible so that your product sells out as quickly as possible. It's a lot harder to get somebody to like a Mother's, which is, there's 3 in Southern California, versus a Walmart, which is, there's, I don't know, 5,000, right?
Okay.
And the second thing is, when you do land in like a Walmart or those places, yes, you do need to like make sure your product sells off the shelves, but they have natural high volume foot traffic, or natural high volume website traffic, and their names are very notable. So if you post on your socials and you use the amplification of that big brand and say, hey, we're in this, it can work both ways, versus saying you're in Mother's on social, and let's say Mother's is only in California. I don't want don't fact check me. I don't think that's the case. I'm not sure. But people who are seeing your stuff in South Carolina, North Carolina, whatever, can't do anything about that information. So having those real conversations, or her not knowing that she needs to put the pricing of what they buy it at versus what they can sell it at on her, like the recommended store price on her assets. They were like, this is great, but we need a line sheet. She had no idea what that was, or what to put on it, or what to say. Those are the type of conversations I've been having literally very often, with folks who kind of have those ambitions of scaling up.
Yeah. And it still comes back to communication, right? It's almost like you're educating them. This is how you communicate if you want to get into this part of the business, right? Which is excellent.
Exactly. And what you need to think about, or the fact that you don't get paid for 90 to 120 days. So you have to create and manufacture all of this stuff. And if, let's say,
take on that financial burden.
Like, let's say she does get, a Walmart next week, and they say they want her in all 19,000 stores, and they want 300 packages in each. She now has to manufacture that before seeing a dime.
Which is interesting. Do you help people with that part of it too? Help them find financing to be able to do that? Or is that a problem that is not part of your
I
service?
have great people I refer them to. I can tell them
Okay.
what I've seen done, but I am not a financial advisor.
But
I will
you
not
make the
take
reference, right? I
responsibility.
refer you to. Yeah, I get that. Which is super interesting. I asked you a few questions here before we wrap. I want
Mm-hmm.
to know about challenges in being an entrepreneur and running
Mm,
things. You mentioned when you worked at Walmart, you work 80 hours a week. Now, I'm a former football player and I worked with football coaches for a long time, and they work in 80 and 90 hours a week. And some of them have very real health problems because of the work they put in
yeah.
to do the work they do. So, but I wonder about what challenges either with clients or challenges in terms of being a person who's a CEO of their own company.
Yeah. I will say that the effort and the intent to take care of oneself is and prioritize oneself is a need. That has
Coming from
probably been
a
my
former
biggest,
student athlete.
yeah, and that's probably been my biggest challenge. I've had um people near and dear to me pass and I still had to keep working. Like I literally my I don't want to say this for anybody to feel bad, but my father passed last year and I literally the most I could do was I was like, okay, I'm going to send a text out to everybody who needs to know who I'm working with directly, who like the ones who call my phone, and I say I need a week. And that's the maximum I could take, and I was still getting calls by Wednesday, and it happened on a
Wow.
Sunday. And I think that is the hardest because when you are the CEO or the founder or the buck stops with you, quite literally, um, you're never off. I take Sundays off, quote unquote, but like my brain is still working on whatever's going on. You're never off the clock. It doesn't matter if you're sick, people passing. That's probably been the hardest thing. And then trying to find spaces to renew your mental, spiritual energy so that you can continue to do good work. Because when you're not right, everything suffers.
Yeah.
Um, I usually, with the times I have like lost clients or, things happen, it was because I had worn myself down and not delegated enough and the quality suffered. So now
Right.
that's a big priority for me. And that's been probably my biggest challenge amongst the regular, like needing capital and all that stuff that comes along with
All the things that entrepreneurs usually
entrepreneurs
deal with, right?
experience. But yeah, the health thing is
So,
big.
so here's a question along those lines,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm, all my parents are gone, mother, father, grandparents, everything. So I have empathy and I can
Yeah.
feel your pain when you talk
I'm
about dealing
sorry
with
for
that.
that.
But here's a question for you, especially you being a former student athlete, right? One thing I've been working on in my other hustle is I'm a leadership communications coach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is help people understand, articulate the story of who they are in the context of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it stems from being a former athlete myself. One thing that athletes suffer from is when they transition away from being a competitor is they don't understand who they are versus what they do. A lot of an athlete's life is caught up in what they do. So when they talk about who they are, they say, I'm a football player or I run track and you know what I mean? And that's how their identity. So then when they don't do that anymore, it's hard for them to understand the difference in who they are versus what they do. I wonder about that as the CEO of your own business, because I'm also a CEO of my own business
Mm-hmm.
and the lines are blurred, right? My thing is making people think by asking questions. I don't know how to separate curiosity from what I do because it all blends together. But I wonder about that for you in terms of the hours you put in, the stresses, what you have to sacrifice and what you have to prioritize. Is there an aspect of that similar transition from being a student athlete to being an entrepreneur to understanding who you are within all those steps in life to now as a CEO? Is there a separation? I am Urina Harrell and I am the CEO. Urina Harrell versus CEO, two different people. Or have you delineated the two in terms of what you've been doing,
Ask me
especially
again in a
because you've been
year.
doing it for a big part of your life? Ask you in a year?
I'm just kidding. No, I think again, this is I tend to be a maverick on issues like this.
Okay.
Um, the whole the work life balance stuff that you see and all that, like to me, I realized it was a futile mission. Like I just
Mhm.
had to accept that I am now Urina Harrell, the blah 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 blah.
Okay.
Um, and by doing that, though, it has opened me up to this because remember, I always say it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And I want it to be positive and impactful. So in that mission, me trying to separate it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be these things. I'm going to do these things, but then I'm going to start sharing the human side of all these things on entrepreneurship journey and what's going on. And I even like jokingly call myself the entrepreneur bestie now, because what I've decided is like, I'm going to stop trying to separate it so much because it's so hard. And I'm just going to go the easier route, accept it all, and say, Urina Harrell, the CEO of Vox Pop Branding, who does all these things, needs a break. And this is what her break looks like. Or she needs family time, and this is what her family looks like and what they mean to her. And I realize that that's probably where I have to go to, because trying to make them different people, I feel like the more we try to separate it, the more we remove humanity from the world of business. And my whole like internal mission in one sentence is returning humanity to the world of business. Like I want to return it back. So by doing that, I need to keep all those titles that people see and then start showing the display of vulnerability and humanity all at the same time. So I've just decided to keep it. It's one big person, and we'll figure it out.
Right. Okay. So and leaning in a little bit, work balance isn't necessarily where I was going with that. Work life. I work college athletics adjacent. That doesn't exist, right? You know, you just do what you do. But what you said there, I think, is important because I kind of live the same way. When somebody asks me how am I doing, I always find myself answering the question in the context of business, of the business that I do. And I think it's because, and I think this is where you're going, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's because when I lay out my core values, one of them, as I mentioned earlier, is curiosity, right? And everything I do is stemming from the ability to make people think by asking questions, which ties back to my core value of curiosity. And that's who I am. And so if you are in a position to make the work you do a part of who you are, there's necessarily a need to separate the two. Because even if I gave up on all my little hustles and business pursuits and went to work for an organization, I am probably going to still operate with curiosity and ask questions of the organization to make them think of how they can execute their goals at a higher level. So it's still the same. So it sounds like that's what you do when you implement this positivity in messaging and implement that to create a better impact in the world and not just, as you use, separating people from their money. It's all intertwined. And it sounds like that's a conclusion that you have arrived at. It's just sometimes you get tired and you need a rest.
Yeah.
Am I wrong in that assessment?
No, that's spot on. I just think that to me, it's kind of like when, and I know a lot of celebrities wouldn't like this, it's like when a musician or artist wants to be separated, like them, the creative versus them, the human. I do get it. Right. I get the desire, but I also think they are what makes the creative, right? Like you're not just a robot or a robot suit. You're not Iron Man. You don't just step into a suit and then all of a sudden, you know, that one piece is just what you created by itself. Like you are, like your experiences are driving the music. Your experiences drive your tenacity. You're all those things that you can't separate it. That's why student athletes are who they are. When you mention it, like we have had to accomplish or come over so many battles, and battles could be meets, games, whatever, that we've learned certain attributes that we can't help but keep with us. So to try to separate that wouldn't make sense. So I think that's exactly it. It's just, I admire people who kind of want to, but I just realized that my reality is to be on the mission that I want to be on. You have to see the entrepreneur and the human who also paints on the weekends. Like you have to see both.
So I agree. I think there is an aspect there of understanding who you are. And that is where a lot of people fail. Because when they lose they break a leg and can't compete anymore, because when they get fired from their job, they haven't done the work of defining and articulating, understanding who they are so that it's not the worst thing in the world. You sound like that or some iteration of that happened early on in college or in life to where you were able to understand who you are. So as you move forward in this business, the business is going to be intertwined with who you are and what you do. That's the part, though, I think most people don't do is
they think that they are what they do.
they think they are what they do, as opposed to this is who I am. So what I do, I'm intertwining what I am in what I do. Does that make sense? There's a difference there. And that's where I think people have a problem, which, like you, the problem I'm trying to solve is that, right?
Yeah.
People don't understand cannot articulate who they are and then articulate that in the context of what they do. And so that's what I try to do with workshops and communication and podcasts and video interviews and all those types of things, which I think is excellent. All right, so last question, and then we'll wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Your latest product, latest offering, we'll say, software as a service. Talk to me about how that ties into marketing and consulting for small businesses and nonprofits.
Yeah, working with foundations and accelerators, I know I mentioned that earlier. I got to see en masse the needs of founders, specifically underserved founders. What's going on? What's keeping them? What's causing them to close their doors, or what keeps their doors open? And marketing is amongst the top 3 reasons why 70% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. It's cited. Like, this is what has been published in numerous research and reports and data. And what I realized was the problem is marketing is very labor intensive. And because of that, it becomes very expensive. Some people charge more than others. And if I wanted to increase access to the people I say I want to serve, and if I have this big mission of getting people on this positive impact messaging wave, I need to start sooner than later, because what I found the most success I get aren't with companies who are already doing really well. It's with the ones who are they're just kind of starting and they're willing to try almost anything. And that's kind of where I need to reach them for this positive impact messaging push. But again, they don't have a lot of capital. So how do I reach those people, still stay afloat, still service them, etc.? And what I came to with, the AI development and technology, I just spent 18 months figuring out how I can do what I do, scale it up in a way that allows me to work with those folks, but not break the bank. So now we have different tools and things that we use internally to help scale up our own services for our done for you products. But we also then allow folks to do it themselves by just, paying and subscribing to use the same stuff we use. They won't get the strategy, so they don't have as much expertise, but at least they have access to the stuff we're using to make things more easy and expedited. So that's kind of the SaaS part. My agency is now very much so service plus SaaS. So we have the service and we use the SaaS to scale it up and charge more affordable prices. But then if you're just not even there yet, you're straight up SaaS. You're just going straight for it and trying to figure it out how you would have figured out anyways. And the truth is, there's not a lot of folks who look like me doing this in this space. So given another opportunity for them to see, like, hey, I started out just like you, and now I'm entering the tech space, basically, is kind of where I'm at.
Is that to help me further understand?
Mm-hmm.
Are there set of defined problems, and so if somebody wants to use this SaaS, they come in and identify what they believe their problems are, and then receive solutions based on all the inputs, basically put in a bunch of inputs and then receive solution based on those inputs.
Yeah. So basically to summarize, because I'm so data and system centered, I have all this data for the last 11 years, and I have figured out what are the key things that will actually help somebody gain traction if they're just starting or depending on where they are. I've put those into packages. And from an agency standpoint, we just say, hey, you can subscribe. Here's what we do for you every month. Here we go. And then we're using on our back end the same SaaS technology to scale this up. And then a human is making sure that the quality is good and rolling it out and developing the strategy. On the SaaS side, we know those same things need to be done. And that's what we have created. So we have things to help people create websites, help people create social, help people put together reviews, or let's say you're a plumbing company and you don't have time to answer the phones and be underneath the sink. We have now software that makes it easier for if people call you and they miss their call, they automatically have a system going back to text them and nurture them through while you're still working on sinks.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of the stuff that we have and that we leverage and that we've seen work, especially for like the mom and pop stuff people.
I think that's excellent. I wonder about if there is, I guess this is when they pay more to get the person, right? Is assessing if what they think is the problem is really the problem, right?
Yeah. So I'm glad you asked that. So the last thing that we kind of added, and this was my afterthought service, to be honest, because I thought that too. I was like, well, most of the time people come to us and they don't know exactly what they need, right? People say, I need better socials. And then I sit back and I talk to them about like what their actual goal is. And I'm like, well, no, what you actually need is more like this, because socials isn't going to get you where you want to be if that's your budget, right? So what we now have is like a pay-as-you-go system, and it's kind of similar to like these unlimited design farms. They basically have people now who out there, if you want to request a design, you can, and you pay a flat fee and you make an unlimited request, but they work on one request at a time. So our pay-as-you-go now is very similar, but instead of just being design, you can get marketing strategy, you can get all these different things. So if you pay that monthly subscription, you can make a request to say, hey, I need a marketing strategy for my business, or I just specifically want one for this summer campaign. I don't know what to do. We'll tap in. It's at as low as $8 a day, which is extremely affordable. We'll tap in and we'll turn around within the time that we specified based on, your package, and we'll help you out. So that's how we've kind of addressed that issue. Simply because, it's hard, but I will say a lot of folks, they come and they are even if they don't know what they need necessarily, or they come with something that is not the solution, you usually still have to give it to them because they're convinced themselves that they want that thing. And then later, after they've gotten the service and you already did the I told you so, now they're willing to kind of see what else is available to help them reach their goals.
That's hilarious. Well, Urina, it sounds like you have had and still have and are going to have a good thing going with the services and products you provide to your clients. I really appreciate you joining us here on the Business of Creativity podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. What you're doing is great. Allowing folks to tell their stories and using your gift is an amazing thing to do. So thank you so much, Ty.
Yes, ma'am. That was Urina Harrell. She is the CEO at Vox Pop Branding, which offers marketing services and consulting for small businesses and nonprofits. And of course, I am Ty Brown with the Business of Creativity podcast. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today.